You're listening to Relatable with Stephanie Michele, only on LA Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Relatable. I'm your host, Stephanie Michele, and today we have a very full show, lots of things to cover. So first, a couple housekeeping things and just shout-outs to people. If you watched last week's show, you might be expecting Claire Weiland to be joining me today. She's a little bit under the weather, so we definitely want to send her prayers and thoughts, hoping to have her back or schedule her in October. But in the meantime, check out Claire's Place Foundation online, just like it sounds. She has a charity event coming up called the Glow Run that's really cool, and I highly suggest you participate or watch a couple videos of Claire. She's really inspirational. So send some thoughts and prayers out to her. Secondly, cannot do the show without talking about Hurricanes Irma and Harvey. And I'm just super, super grateful right now to have heard from everybody that I know of in Florida. I have members of my team. My web team is there, my family, my mother and my stepfather, and just grateful to say everybody is safe. They're heading home. You know, they're dealing with damages, but everybody's safe and live. And most of the people that I know have power. So just want to give a shout out to them. And also want to give birthday shout outs to 3 people. So yesterday, of course, was September 11th. And I actually know 3 people that have the birthday on September 11th, have a birthday on September 11th. And I know that's kind of hard. And, you know, to have to think about the anniversary of September 11th. So obviously thoughts and prayers to people that were affected by it. But I want to say happy birthday to my stepmom, Nancy, to my stepbrother, David, and Jacqueline, a mutual friend of ours, Jacqueline Millen. Her birthday is September 11th. So big shout outs to everybody that celebrated a birthday yesterday. So getting into today's show, wasn't expecting to talk about what we're going to talk about today, but found myself really inspired and just thinking a lot of what's going on in terms of the news cycle because of Irma and because of Harvey. And so, you know, it made me reflect on really just how blurred the lines are and the tactics of online content distributors. And when I say online content distributors, you know, there's lots of different types. There's everything from just fun kind of news like BuzzFeed, and then all of our news sources like CNN, Fox News. Those are content distributors, so that's what I'm talking about. But there's a lot of blurred lines between them and then actual marketer companies and advertisers. And I am a marketer, and you know, I know all the tricks, especially when it comes to marketing online. And it's always been important to me to employ ethical tactics. So in my line of work, we call that white hat, as opposed to black hat tactics or hacks. Those are kind of doing some things that are, you know, taking some shortcuts that might not be so ethical, and definitely, you know, shortcuts and hacks and tricks and things. All marketing professionals know that in order for us to sell something to somebody, we have to speak to the customer's needs and wants. And in order to do that, we do a lot of market research to learn about the customer. What do they like? What do they don't like? Where do they live? What do they do when they shop? You know, how do they carry out shopping or making a buying decision? And what other interests do they have? All that sounds perfectly understandable, right? You know, that's what you would expect a marketer or advertiser to do. But what if that same data about buying habits and, you know, demographic information that marketers and brands use is available to content providers or content distributors that are selling you a product in theory, but it's a little bit different. What they're selling you or what they want from you is for you to just spend a lot of time on their sites. They want to just really keep you addicted to their content. How do they do that? Well, when you're looking for something and you do a search and you get to a site and it kind of appears you're in the right place for what you're looking for, but after 30 or 40 minutes, you discover, oh my gosh, I've been here for a long time. I've seen a bunch of other stuff, but I still don't have the information that is needed. They're doing that for a reason, and we're going to get into that on today's show. What else can I say about this? So it's also known as and this is kind of the rise of these sensationalized headlines that are just get you to go, what can that possibly be? I want to know what's going on there. So that's called clickbait. There's a reason why they're make you kind of go like this. They want you to click through to it. Now we're seeing breaking news every second of the day. Really, is there breaking news every second of the day? But this is all connected to the product that their product that they're selling is getting you to stay there longer. And as it relates to Hurricane Harvey and Irma, my personal frustration is all-time high. Harvey and Irma were very different experiences for me. So I have family in Texas, and I have family in Florida. My family in Texas were never going to be affected by Harvey. They weren't in harm's way. But my family in Florida were for sure going to be affected. It was just a question of how bad. It wasn't, if it would happen, it was just a question of how bad. So, and my parents, this is my parents, my mom and my stepdad, they've never gone through a hurricane before. And of course, being on the other side of the country, I wanted to do what I could to support them in all the decisions they were going to have to make. So, when to evacuate, where would they go, what kind of supplies do they need, how long should they stay away, how should they prep the house to take the impact, what will they do when they don't have supplies, when they come back to it, if they don't have power, if they don't have access to water or gas, so many different decisions and the variables of making those decisions in a sequence that's right for them. I definitely wanted to support them. So as I tried to find information, I was reminded of how bad the system is. I would go and search, and it would say, oh yeah, this is a place you want to be. In particular, I wanted where Irma was now, so to get an update of where it was and how close it was to my family, and then just latest updates. And of course, CNN was the one that kind of popped up the most, but it would pop up saying, yep, live updates here and path of Irma, but I'd get there and it wasn't transparent where that information was. On top of that, I had to watch several advertising messages or, short videos to get to that content. So, 10 minutes turns into 20, into 30. And some of those were so inappropriate. I remember two, one was a package, a vacation package, and it showed this happy family on a ski vacation. I'm like, well, that's inappropriate. I can't even imagine what people that are really dealing with the tragedies or that, trying to get the news for Irma, having to see that at this point when they're worried about their house and their family. And the other one that bothered me even more was a State Farm commercial. And in this commercial, State Farm first, this commercial starts out and they list all the hurricanes in this really dramatic way. Katrina, Rita, Andrew, just super dramatic, really dark and gloomy music playing. And then at the end they go, State Farm, we're a force of nature too. I'm like, really? You're a force of nature. You're just a company. I again, can't imagine what it would feel like if I'm dealing with a tragedy right now and I'm forced to watch this commercial and then starting to think, oh, shoot, do I have to worry about my insurance now? There's nothing I can do about it, but do I have the right company? It's so crazy. So we're going to talk about this. And, as I went through this process and reminded myself of where really I want to get, where I should be going to get news, I came up with some thoughts about what we should be doing in crisis and even just a review of what sites we should be using to get our news. And, with that being said, so I thought the best way to kind of handle this topic was to bring on a colleague that's also in digital marketing, and we can share some things that probably the average person doesn't know about what's happening online and how you're being targeted and how information is specifically being put in front of your eyeballs to elicit a certain activity. We can talk about that, and then we'll talk about really, some guidelines for considering where you should get your news, and especially in a crisis. So sure. That brings me to introducing my lovely guest to my left here. This is Amy Gray. Amy has 15 years in PR and marketing in entertainment and healthcare, specializing in search engineering and reputation management. 3 years ago, she launched Miss Gray Marketing. I can't do that without attitude. I think it has to have some attitude. is currently launching a new business called Socialplex, focusing on community building through thought leadership, networking events, social media, and public relations.
Yes.
Hi, Amy.
Hi. Hello. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad that we're having this conversation. I'm so glad that you answered the call to do it, because we had to, we didn't know we were doing this show until Sunday. So
I'm always excited to talk about SEO.
Yeah.
And digital media. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, so before we get into today's topic, which is a big one, I think,
Yes.
There's lots of information to cover. I always ask guests if there's anything they just want to clear their mind, put it out there before we have this topic. Anything distracting you that we need to talk about before we go there?
I have been watching your show from the beginning, and I know that you always ask that question, and I have thought in the past, if I'm ever on her show, what would I talk about? But the thing that's always on my mind, top of mind, of course, is my daughter, my 11-year-old daughter, and I'm always wondering throughout my day while I'm at work, the craziest things. Is she warm enough in her classroom?
Aww.
Did she have enough breakfast? Is she hungry? Is she staying focused on her studies? That's always in my mind.
Yeah.
And I think my mom worried about that too, and I thought she was neurotic and crazy, and I think my daughter is feeling the same about me. So that's where my head is almost always at least a good portion of my mind.
So do you now have empathy for your mom when you were thinking she was crazy? You're like, oh, now I get it.
Oh my gosh. I mean, she said to me once in a fight, she said, I hope you grow up someday and have a daughter just like you. And my mom has passed, and so every once in a while I look up to the heavens and I go, your wish has been granted. Long live Jumbie. Yeah.
And we should add, so I know Amy's daughter. Her daughter is Maddie, and if you watch the 4th of July show, you also know Maddie. She was on with one of her friends, and we talked about what it means to be an American. So if you haven't watched that show, it's very cute, and you can now know you now have a connection to the family.
Yeah.
seeing
Yes.
Amy here. So she's in school. Everything's fine. We might as well.
She's there.
She's
made
there.
it. We made it. You know,
Okay.
every day it's like a triumph that we made it to the bus.
We made it to the bus.
We did it.
In a good mood, or is that too much to ask?
Oh, that's definitely too much to ask. You
Okay,
know.
just make it to the bus.
We're about 50-50. Good,
Yeah.
bad, good, bad.
All right, cool. Well, so we have a big topic to talk about today. As I was sharing some of my frustrations about Irma, what came up for you? Do you have family in Florida?
I
Did
do,
you go through this?
actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I do have family in Florida, and they're in Orlando, and I was wondering if they were going to be okay and how that was going to affect them. They're a little bit more inland, but then of course the storm made that big
Yes.
swoop and change, and so unexpectedly, they were caught in that, and were posting pictures of them all in the living room, with the generator and the one TV, and it was very, it was very sweet, and they had a good sense of humor about it. But they were not, I think, as close to the eye of the storm where your parents were.
Yeah.
And, having gone through the Harvey, which I didn't know anyone at all there, but having watched all the highlights on that, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what's happening right now in the world that this is all... It feels like the world is falling apart
Yeah.
a little bit, and then we had this big earthquake.
Yeah.
And so tie it into whatever you think it is about the world changing, and greenhouse gases, and global warming, whatever your thoughts are. We're in a real crisis right now.
Well, and I just want to point out, and I don't mean to do this, but exactly what Amy just shared is exactly the kind of anxiety that I'm talking about that news sources want you to have.
Right.
Because it kind of keeps you going, well, what more is there? Oh, maybe this is a good time to research global warming, or, to just keep you going back and on your phone and looking up information and keeping you there. That's how they make money. And we're going to get to that,
For sure.
exactly how, but thank you for sharing all that, because that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what I want to talk about. I mean, feeling that, and then imagine the compound, already being susceptible to that as just a normal consumer, because we all are, but then having a real crisis at hand that you're experiencing or someone in your family's experiencing, you're like, oh my God, how do I know for sure what's going on here?
Right.
What I did conclude after getting in the loop a little bit on news, is local news sources, trying to find local news sources, tracking weather, tracking traffic in cases when they had started to evacuate. And, a good part about social media, I think, is hashtags, is like just looking up local hashtags and seeing what other people are saying, or being able to communicate to someone in your community really quickly, because they're talking about it in the moment is a good idea. And you can get more of an accurate account by the minute, by the second, of like what's going on.
I found it interesting that, I'm watching on the news at the end of my day, and I'm here in sunny California, where we're dealing with a terrible heat wave, right? But I'm watching on the news a little bit to see what TV news looks like compared to the social media news, and they're talking about this woman in Houston in particular, how she used social media as her SOS, and it saved her life and the life of her neighbors. And I thought, this is amazing, because she was actually using hashtags and was actually located using that. And so for all of the things that people say about social media being, a time suck and horrible, at times it's a lifesaver.
Yeah, if you know what you're doing, if you're employing a certain tactic and you know what you're doing, absolutely, it's a time saver. And I think, like we're saying, these don't take for granted the use of a hashtag to find people that are talking about the topic that you care about in the moment, right there in the same space and time. And then being able to connect with them. Don't take that for granted, because there's tremendous power there.
Yeah, she absolutely pinpointed specific resources and was able to locate that through just doing hashtag searches and applying those to her posts. And she was going live, and so it was pretty fascinating that we're able to do that.
Now, the other side of it is to maybe get to those or to make those connections is seeing all the people that want their 15-minute of content fame and are posting their pictures or their videos, and they're hoping regular news will pick them up. And I definitely saw a lot of those on news sources. One in particular that stood out was a drone video. And this particular person decided to put this happy, almost hopeful, cheery music with this, and it's just showing complete devastation in the area that it was over. And it was so weird to me for two reasons. Why a news source would actually pick that up, and then two, just the confusion on my nervous system. What am I supposed to feel right now? There's this happy music, but I'm looking at total devastation, and it made me pause. And again, took some time. I took some time to process that. It distracted me off what I was trying to find, because now I'm emotionally having this reaction.
It's a double-edged sword that everybody has access to the media now.
Yeah.
I mean, really, everybody has access to it. So you do get those weird things on the media. I see those things, and they distract me and send me into these media wormholes all of the time, because I go, can this be real?
Yeah. Media wormholes. Remember that. That's exactly what we're talking about. Yeah, that's a good term for it.
I get sucked in all the time, and I'm in the business of digital media, and I have an awareness to a certain degree that a lot of people don't, about what you find and what you see.
Yeah.
But I mean, somebody, but it's funny that you found that.
And then you see the thing, and then you share it with someone, and now you're not contributing just you wasting time, but your friends wasting time.
And
can you believe this?
Yeah,
can you believe this? And then they click through. It's just a mess. Well, let's talk about how online media works, and particularly let's really share with people how these sites make their money. So so you're informed and might make different decisions about it. So there's two models in how they make their money. They either, it's advertising, so they're an advertiser's either paying them per click. So if we as a consumer clicks on an ad, then they're paid. Or more likely, and this is what most of the sites are using, is a cost per impression, which is basically just the exposure to 1,000 people. In that case, when they drive a bunch of people to their site, it's super profitable for them, and if we share it out, it's super profitable to them. We're going to tell you how they drive to this site in a little bit, but that's most likely the case, because probably you're not as likely to click on an ad that looks like a true ad. And this is the other part of the issue. If it's a true ad and you're actually looking for information and you're like, I don't need to click on this toothpaste ad right now. It's like, I'm not interested. But if it's hidden, if it's cleverly disguised as content, like, look at this lady with the biggest teeth in Georgia, like something silly like that, the whitest teeth in Georgia, then you might click on it, or you might just kind of remember it, which is what's called an impression. You're just kind of having like a little bit of a memory of it. And then as you stay on the page, you're like, now I'm getting curious. They say it takes 7 times, 7 impressions for you to actually create an action or for an action to be created. So you probably see that same thing, as you scroll through the news piece that you're looking. As you click through to another one, it's there. And then all of a sudden it's 7. Now you're like, I can't not click on this.
Right. Yes. Right. Yeah. And you see things on billboards. And if you pick it up enough around the world, you're going to, whether you thought you wanted that toothpaste or you wanted, that hair loss cream or not, suddenly you're going,
I'm thinking about it.
No.
Yeah.
I am a little lighter,
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I think it's important to talk about how those things in digital media are really driven specifically to your computer, to what you're searching, and to your digital profile. You click on something once and suddenly you're an interested party, and that creates content floods for you.
Yeah.
Specifically.
And interested party is categorized by certain tag words. So now it's like, well, if this person is interested in this, I'm going to show her this. I'm going to send this to them.
Right. So it's whether you're clicking on it or something similar or a similar product. We've all been, on a specific website looking for a pair of boots or a shirt, and then suddenly we're going, why all of a sudden am I getting all these crazy ads for these boots and these shoes?
Or socks or complimentary products.
Right, complimentary products. And it's, because you've already shown an interest. You've already established that presence.
And, what we're talking about right now is what's called targeting. Other forms of this, and you've probably seen this, and even if you don't, it's creating impression value. So Amy talked about the billboards, traditional marketing, all that stuff. The big marketing and advertising companies are using all that they can to put in front of you as you go about your day and you travel across your city to make those 7 impressions happen. So it's not all just digital. It's highly strategic. Don't think it's not. It's highly strategic. But targeting, the other thing that you're seeing in digital targeting is you looked at something 3 days ago and now it's in your Facebook feed. Or now it's somewhere else. It's on your Skype. They're keeping track of it so they can get you another impression in front of you.
Yeah, and they're paying big dollars to do that. But that also happens in more subject matter. Specific type of.
And that's where we're getting to. So, relatively harmless for products and goods and products. I get it. That. Yeah, we kind of expect it. Sometimes it's helpful if you forgot to buy something and you really, really were interested. It's okay, great. There's the reminder. Thank you. I didn't have to put that on my calendar or put a note. Helpful. But now take this and think about news sources, and we can't have this conversation without considering who owns the news. And I'm going to share a link about who actually owns media companies, and it's the 1%, guys. Hate to say this, but it's definitely people that are using it as a power move, that have political agendas that are attached to what they feed out and what they get you to do, i.e. voting. So there's a bigger picture here. So imagine now these people have the same opportunity to put targeted information in front of you, and they kind of already know things about you and how you're going to react, especially because social data is being considered in this. So if you are the kind of person that always negatively posts things that, super critical and stuff, they're going to create headlines that are similar to that because they know you respond to that. If you're Miss Joy all the time, your headlines are going to be different than the friend that I just mentioned earlier, the person I mentioned earlier. So, and they're not just doing that because, I think they'll like this content. They also want you to do something. They want you to take a next step or believe a certain thing. again,
sign up for something.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of money in segmentation and data. It's no mistake that data is the hottest industry right now because they're using that for sales and for following. That's really crucial to survival.
Yeah. And that brings us to another point. We are the product. So our data becomes another product that a media source or content distributor, online site that's just putting out content, our data becomes an asset for them. So part of what we do in our activities and what we information about us that fits into these like segments, that's something that they can leverage and say, well, we have all the people in California come to our site, or all moms come to our site, or all women that are pregnant right now come to our site. Whatever it is, that becomes an asset. So you are the product. Like you spending time on these places, and the more time that you spend on them, you become their product that they're leveraging.
And that could be a great thing too. You could become part of a lead list that you're happy to be on because you're seeking this information or this product.
You're getting special
service.
Incentives or notes about like early releases. Like from a marketing standpoint, it's great. Like I think if it's done well, I think there's no issues. I think from the content side of this is where it gets dirty.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes it gets really nasty because when you're searching for information on any level that's really important to you, and you're going to make life decisions based on that, where you're going to buy a home, who you're going to vote for, what what you're going to follow, what charity you might invest in. A lot of these things are really driven by this data that they're collecting online, information about you, and sometimes it plays into your worst fears. And that's where I think it gets irresponsible and dangerous. I do want to say, though, I think that, and we were talking about this yesterday, I think that the media is in such a funny place right now, particularly TV journalists and, newspaper editorialists and such. They're in a funny place right now because they're taking a huge hit financially. The digital space has really cut off their food supply.
Not selling newspapers, not selling traditional stuff.
Right, and so it's forcing them to really, really up their game. And so I think that some of that sensational media stuff that we're seeing is a response to that discomfort. Yeah. And where they have to really push to get those, the advertising on their platforms.
And not to mention, a lot of news sources or news channels even are owned by media or entertainment media companies. So now they have the same kind of profit model as entertainment companies do. So they're not just competing against other news sources, they're competing against Netflix and Hulu and Amazon for your time too. So it's a very different time. My heart kind of goes out to reporters because I do find like people that actually want to report on the news and the facts, like they're very ethical people. They put themselves in harm's way and trying to get, a source to reveal something, and yet they're so under attack right now because you've got two things coming at them. You've got, politics saying, oh, it's all fake news, and there's fake. I think we should be talking about fake ads as more than fake news. Yeah, to be clear, there is definitely fake information out there, but the newscasters and the editors and these are not the people that are putting fake stuff out. Like they still have this ethical code of we want to inform people on the facts.
Yeah, I think I always think of journalists as these super sleuths, out in the middle of the night trying to get the good story and get the real deal. And I think that in the long game, we're going to look back and go, thank gosh we had them because they were the ones fighting for the real information. And I'm not saying politically just in this last year. I'm saying over time, for many, many years, we've had journalists who are out there really fighting to give us some non-biased, clear information that's just the bullet point facts, no sides being taken.
Yeah.
But
that's boring. They're poor, these poor people. That's what they're up against. Hey, that wasn't exciting enough, that news story that you put out. Lean to the left or the right, or they're being forced to because now even local channels, and I encourage everybody to do this research, are owned by these bigger companies. And when you start to follow that trail, it's this billionaire. And I'm gonna put a list out. You guys will decide on your own. There's a great Forbes article that said 15 billion billionaires own America's news media companies. And just read it and make your own decisions. But when you start to track through this, you're like, oh, now I get, like, these guys are being asked to say something that seems like news, but it's not really. It's more wanting you or encouraging you to believe a certain thing.
And I think this is a good time to talk a little bit about social responsibility and understanding a little bit how bots and spiders and all of that work.
Let's talk about bots.
Because I think that people are pretty savvy now. They have a general
What is a bot? Let's first talk about what is a
Yeah.
bot. How would you define what a bot is?
So I define bots as anything that drives popular information to the top of a search engine for a specific demographic of people.
So that's one form of it, right? So a bot, and generally speaking, is anything that can be programmed to automate a certain activity. And in terms of what we're talking about today, yes, what you just shared is true. It's like it's something that's been programmed to take certain keywords and just like connect it to a bunch of different bots and just mass spread that headline, that topic, that link out. And that's how we all start like talking about the same piece of news, even if we're in different parts of the world, because that system is touching you and touching your social media profiles faster than like it ever could before in terms of information. And I particularly want to bring up like just how powerful this is in this case. Actually, two things. One is, look at when we found out about the earthquake in Mexico. Like, it was Thursday. I didn't hear about it until Friday because Irma was what people were looking for. Irma was what was feeding the wormhole, everybody's wormhole for information. So earthquake, a huge earthquake in Mexico couldn't even make it through because we as consumers were responding so much to Irma.
Right.
You didn't get that information until later.
And it's important to note that it's sort of the same way a virus spreads. The more something clicks, the more validity it gets.
Yes.
The Google algorithm and the search engine algorithms are really set up so that there's there's validity placed on information depending on how many times it gets clicked, but then also how much time people hang out looking at the information. And then if they follow other links within the information, puts it into overdrive.
It's like one tiny little trigger, and then people start responding to it, and then it's like, okay, we're favoring this information now. We're going to put it everywhere. People want this.
And that's what I think really contributes to the sensational, making it more sensationalizing the news pieces, is because people want you to spend 2 minutes there reading it so that it becomes legitimate and gets driven towards the top. So that's why they're putting all of this unbelievable stuff in the beginning, and you don't get the real, factual information till towards the bottom. And sometimes the factual information you get is not very valuable to you in a crisis situation.
Yeah, and by that time you're wore out and like not even wanting to respond to that. The other thing that I wanted to share about bots is, because it's not transparent that it's a bot, so a Twitter profile that's not transparent that this is like something that's been pre-programmed. By the way, it's the easiest type of program you can do. You could go on Craigslist right now and find somebody that can make a bot. It's so easy if you are a programmer. So you've got all these different profiles. They're not transparent about it being in automation. And so let's say you are exposed to a piece of information that came from that, and you are like adamantly opposed to what that piece of information is, and you start kind of this Twitter war, or at replying this fake account that's automated that has no feelings, and you're like interacting with it, and it's like saying things back to you that's like really offensive and out of line, and you just keep going. It's so wasteful, whether you like her or not. Chelsea Handler just did a show on this, and I will tell people, warn them, that the example they used was kind of anti-Trump, but regardless of that, like she had a couple people on her team go hire a programmer off Craigslist, create one, and they tell the whole story, very transparent about like what happened, how things spread out, how people were interacting with it. how they were shut down, how there's lots of bots out there that Twitter even knows about and hasn't shut them down. It's really worth watching just to enlighten you on really how much information is out there that's not really meant to, be something for your well-being. It's not meant to be informative. It's just kind of to keep you in the wormhole. It's kind of the key word.
Towards something else, another agenda that you probably don't want to be part of, or you might not want to be part of.
Well, if you like anxiety, you might be part of it. But if you don't, then you probably don't want to be there.
We use it in marketing, not bots. Mm-hmm. I don't, and I'm sure that you don't either.
No, we're ethical marketers.
Yes, of course. We're looking for a more organic audience that's going to convert, and obviously picking up a bunch of followers from bots is not necessarily the way you get a true loyal fan of a product.
I would say, though, just to play devil's advocate, or just be as clear about this as we possibly can, there might be a situation where a bot would be handy. Like if it was totally 100% segmented on a topic, and it was a situation where you needed to get stuff out fast. Maybe like I don't know, something about health or.
It is probably one of the quicker ways to infiltrate the digital space. Yeah,
I think if they were done, I'm sure there's a way, because someone will challenge me on this, to use a bot in an ethical way is what I want to say.
In a positive way, sure.
Just unfortunately,
of course, if you can use it for something negative, I'm sure there's a way to find it for something positive. But what I was going to say, in our line of work, sometimes you're a little bit of a human bot in your attempt to profile an audience, segment an audience, and create desirable advertising, something that they want to receive and enjoy, and that's a big part of what we do in looking at audience behaviors. And so, we're seeing all this information about bots and having information filtered to us, and I think that it can cause people to go, oh, I don't even want to trust anything that's on the media. But I think, you have a list, and we'll go over that about what's reliable and what you can kind of count on to be non-biased.
Definitely. There's just two more things before we get to that I want to share on this topic. So one, I just want to go a little bit deeper on how much information is out there about you. Not to scare you, but just to inform you. There was a great article, and I'm going to share it in the archives of the show, of how that just recapped how campaign managers really during the election were using this type of information to put information in front of you that would make you think a certain way. I vote, okay? And this is, you got to remember, this is where we started to hear the word fake news. For sure, a lot of what was being done during that time was driving people to sites that appeared to be news sites, but they weren't. And it was meant to create a certain response from you. That is challenging in two ways. Number one is, so now somebody has information that they really believe is true because they were targeted so specifically to have that information. And there's actually a professor from Cambridge that developed this algorithm that within 300 of your activities in social media, they could tell more about you and predict your behavior, your next steps, by 99% accuracy. More about you than your spouse. So they had that kind of information, and then they would put certain types of, politically charged articles in front of you to lean you in a certain way. And the problem with that is now people are exposed to certain things, and they can't even remember where they saw it from. So they can't say, well, I believe this. I really believe it's true, and I heard it somewhere. Well, where? So we can talk about it, so we can kind of do some fact checking. They couldn't really come up with it because there was so much of that. And Facebook didn't do a good job of shutting it down until after the election. It was totally being used. People knew about it, but it wasn't shut down until after the election.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was scary, that kind of information that was going around. And you would look, I won't name names, but some of the news sources you would be looking at, you would think, of course, totally reputable news source. This is great information. But then you would look at the article and you would go, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. And then if you go and you do a little bit of research and you fact check it, their source is not legitimate. So It was a very scary thing.
So fact checking is obviously one of our recommendations. It's like when you feel yourself responding to something in a very like, oh, gosh, I got to do something about this, fact check it first, always. I mean, that's just the world that we live in. The other important part of this equation is understanding what the terms of use agreement, when you go to a site and especially when you sign on for their app and you quickly go, yep, I accept the terms of agreement, terms of use, terms of service, it's often called terms of service. We probably need to be reading that stuff. That's really where it's going to tell you how much of your social data or what type of data they're actually gathering about you, and then you can make a decision to use that source, that news source again, or do a search incognito so people can't track that. But I definitely recommend reading those things. They're boring, but you'll start to have more information and make better choices. I will say there is a plugin for search engines that's called TOSDR. It stands for too long didn't read, basically, terms of use that you didn't read. And it's just a little extension that I now have in my browser that they rate terms of use or terms of service agreements and tell you exactly, hey, this is not good. They're taking this information. I would particularly look at Google's. I'd look at the sites that you're on a lot, Facebook, and you decide how you want to participate in those spaces after knowing some of that information. It's good to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some advertising that I want to see, and I want to be targeted. I want to be targeted.
Yeah,
sometimes.
In some cases, of course, yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff that's been coming to me in the last couple of years that I am really uncomfortable with, and I don't want people to know, every single thing about how I think and
where you're shopping online,
how I'm shopping, what I'm buying, what I'm thinking, what political parties or charities that I'm involved in, all the time. I don't want that all the time.
So that brings us to just kind of talking about recommendations, especially when you need to get news quickly. So let's talk about that. We've already talked about a couple of them. So we do give thumbs up. We'll give the 2 marketing thumbs up. You put your thumb up.
4
thumbs up. Yeah. Social media hashtags are your best way to kind of get information from people in your local community. So use your city as an example. My parents live in Punta Gorda, Florida, so I was looking at hashtag Punta Gorda during the crisis, during the evacuation of Irma. You can look up county information. You can look up relief, volunteer, all kinds of things. But hashtags are your friend. I don't think of why you shouldn't be using hashtags or using them as a research tool.
Right, and local radio stations, you can find every radio station online right now, and here we have Pasadena Community College and Santa Monica. They usually are up to the minute on what's going on. If we were to have some type of disaster here, those would be the places that I would look for relevant information.
I agree with that. Any kind of local stations. I definitely go local first if you can. When you have more time and you're not in a crisis, you might want to do the research on who owns those stations.
Right.
But when you're trying to get information quickly, I think that they're the best bet. I said earlier, Weather Report or Weather Channel was pretty good, although they have a lot of user-generated content on there too. I saw some videos in the advertising. That State Farm advertising was all over that.
That is horrible.
It was really horrible. I'll share the link with you guys. You can decide if you think it's horrible or not. I think it was
Oreo
bad
cookie thing in the dark, and it was just bad taste.
I think it's really in bad form, but everybody else can decide. So we said local. Go local if you can. Do some stress checks and time check-ins. I think just kind of monitoring your own use when you're trying to find information. Like, hey, I've spent 10 minutes here and I still don't have it. Let's go somewhere else. Let's go back to search.
Monitor too how many sites you
click through.
How many click throughs that you did, because 3 or 4 clicks back, I think you're getting less and less reliable.
Yeah.
When you do your search, the top couple of things that you're looking at. If you're not feeling that they're giving you answers in the first minute or so, bounce to something else, but don't keep clicking.
Totally. And by the way, when you're clicking through, pay attention closely to all the things that are kind of happening while you're clicking through. And in the bottom left-hand corner of your browser, we'll see like that's where it's gathering the tracking information. You'll see all like the plugins and things that are used on that site. That might give you some insight of like what we're talking about too. You'll kind of start to see these names come up. Google Analytics, whatever it is, like, but it's like tracking stuff that's on the site. Not to scare everybody, but just to inform you, again, of what's going on. You always have an opportunity to browse in private. That's a setting in your browser. Just go to settings and look for it. Do a Google search that says how to browse in private on Chrome or Firefox or whatever you're using. Really, really easy to find.
Yes.
What else?
Browsing incognito is great. I love that.
And the last thing that I would suggest is not necessarily in a crisis, but, change it up. Change what you're doing online. Be mysterious. Don't like be so predictable in your buying habits and your patterns and what sites you go to. Don't rely on one site ever. I think is really like for news or anything. Like move around. Like just move around and I think that's a better way of ensuring that ensuring that not so much information is being tracked about you. But I think you'll be more informed that way too.
Yeah, play devil's advocate with yourself. It's also kind of fun to do that, especially when it's a politically heated time and you're trying to see what other people are saying about whatever is important to you. It's kind of fun to look and play devil's advocate and challenge your own mindset. Because actually sometimes you find something that you're like, oh, I hadn't thought about it.
Yeah.
From that
totally.
direction.
I mean, I think we are always finding things like that. If we're living, we're always finding stuff that's new about ourselves or how we think. And it's kind of fun to be able to discover new things about yourself that way.
I do that a lot when I'm researching products that are maybe competitors to some of my clients. I'm looking to say, well, what are people saying about this product? Or what are people saying about the not using of the product? Just to kind of see, what the value is in it. It's good.
So we're running out of time. We could talk about this for so long. There's so much information, but I hope we've inspired you to think a little bit more. I'm going to share a lot of links in the archive for this particular topic. I will make sure that you can find both of us on Twitter and Instagram. So if you have more questions or thoughts about this, reach out to us. We have a lot of resources in this area, and we're happy to share them with you. But before we go, so we got 2 more things to do, and we went really heavy in this topic, but let's learn a little bit more about Amy. And the best way that I can do that is just to ask you some random question. And I have a book and I have a box of table topics now. So do you want the book or the box?
Ooh, your choice. Go all the way.
Okay. All right. So we're going to go box. We haven't gone box in a while. The book is new.
The book is new.
The book is new. So and the box questions. It's weird. It's so weird to me sometimes how I pull one and I want it to be random and it's kind of on topic.
Oh, wow.
So what grade would you give yourself for environmental responsibility?
Okay, I will give myself a B.
A B.
I'll give myself a B because I have a kid who's crazy about recycling, and if she sees someone on the street littering, she gets completely upset about it. So I think as a parent, I'm doing a good job of passing on that responsibility. And I hate things like packaging and
extra packaging.
Yeah, so I'm always trying to buy and consider that, and I am an avid gardener, so I'm growing my own food a lot. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into that's a big question, but I would give myself a B. I think I do all right.
So Maddie's keeping you on check. Maddie could maybe upgrade you to an A at some point.
She could upgrade me to an A for sure.
That's awesome. All right. So the last thing that we're going to do on the show today, of course, is the segment called Heartswell. I almost forgot. Forgot my own segment. I really want to talk about this topic that we talked about for more because there's so much about it.
We'll have to do a part 2.
We might have to do a part 2.
I always get excited
We'll
about
do a part 2 and
it.
do a call-in. Maybe is what we'll do. We'll do that. Yeah, let's do that.
Let's do.
So Heartswell. Why do we do Heartswell? So I like to show that it's not hard to express deep feelings, and we should be doing it more. It's not that vulnerable, and we need to tell people how we care about them and how they've inspired us and all of those things. So it's another way for people to learn about my guests too. Like who is it that inspires you? Who has affected you? So are you okay with doing a heart swell? Do you have someone in mind?
Of course, I do. I have someone really important in mind.
Okay, so look at the camera. And
my heart swell would go out today to my stepdad, Leo Moki, who I think is probably the best person ever on the planet. He's been battling pancreatic cancer for 3 years and doing an amazing job, staying very strong. And my sister, Lori, is... on October 1st, she's going to run a 5K in his honor. I think he's going to try to do it as well.
Wow.
So go to supportpancan.org, I believe it is, but it'll be on all my social media.
We'll share that in the archive as well.
Yeah, if you want to donate. I think she's in the top 10. We're hoping that they'll be in the top 10 because that's a pretty great place to be and exciting. So they're going to honor him at this walk. But pancreatic cancer research. Definitely donate and contribute. I will say this. He's been at the OSU James Cancer Research Center, and it's really given him some great hope. So cancer research, it doesn't only support the long goal, it also supports people in their fight in the moment, and it's been amazing. So shout out to OSU for being so amazing, to my stepdad, who packed my lunches and took me to ballet school on a double bicycle made for two. Great, amazing dad. So
awesome.
Hey, I love you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming to the rescue on quick notice. And I think we have to do a part 2. We'll do a call-in soon.
That will be fun.
Yeah,
we could go in a million directions with this topic.
Totally.
Hopefully, there's no more disasters for a while.
That's true. Yes, let's just pray for that and put that energy out, that our Earth stays in place for a while.
Please, right?
Yes. So that does bring us to the end of the show. Thank you for being here. I'm going to share all of her links so you can get in touch with Amy and learn more about what she does. Next show, you're going to hear from the Millennial Voice, and we're actually going to talk a little bit about social media, but she's a young writer. She wrote a really, really amazing book of poetry her name is Isabel Mente, and she's going to be my guest on the next show. So we'll probably kind of loop back into some of these things in a different way in terms of like what social media means to her. And I think the social challenge of the week is talk to your friends and family about where they get their news, and then maybe go a little bit further and say, hey, let's read the terms of service here and like see if we still want to get it here, or do some of these checks that we're talking about. Like, how do you feel afterwards? Like, how often are you checking it? Does that feel good to you? Just have some awareness around where you're getting your news and why. So that's going to be our social challenge for the week. You can connect with either one of us on social media. She's Miss Gray Marketing on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Yes, look at that consistency. That's a marketer for you. I, of course, am Relate with Steph on Instagram and Facebook, and now Love More Now on Twitter. We will be sharing so many links in the archive of this show. And just a reminder, I have a PSE coming up on Wednesday, September 27th at the Relational Center. With that being said, that's the end of the show. As always, I explore you to relate with more curiosity. Yes. See you later.
Thank you.
You're listening to Relatable with Stephanie Michele, only on LA Talk Radio.